He was a janitor, an Army veteran, and a gas station attendant from Vermont. He was more wealthy than most financial experts on the TV, and he lived more frugally than most. If dying rich is success, what is living? There's an infinite number of ways people can live their life, and countless motivators to guide you down your path. One of the most common motivators in modern day is money. And, like some of you, Ronald Read also dreamed of being rich. Ronald Read was born in 1921 in Dermiston, Vermont. He lived on an impoverished farm with a small home, no car, and no one in his family had ever graduated high school. Getting to school meant walking or hitchhiking 4 miles one way. But Ronald would make the trip day after day. Eventually, in 1940, becoming the first person in his entire family to graduate high school, earning his diploma from Brattleboro Union High School. That same year, he would go on to join the United States Army, where he would serve as a military policeman, deploying to places like North Africa, Italy, and the Pacific Theater during World War II. And after 5 years of service, Ronald would return home to Vermont with an honorable discharge. He would go on to accept a gas station attendant job at Haviland's Service Station, a small business his brother owns. It was there that he met Barbara March, a customer and a single mother of two. Not much is known about Barbara's life, but what is known is this: Ronald took responsibility. At 38 years old, Ronald would go on to buy his first and only house. And a year later, not only would Ronald and Barbara get married, but Barbara and the kids would move in. Ronald supported her children as his own, eventually paying for college educations for both of them, but unfortunately, the life they built wasn't meant to last. Despite Ronald's full support through everything, in 1970, after 22 years together, Barbara would die of cancer, leaving Ronald behind with grief and two stepchildren that still know him as their father. Ronald would continue to work as a gas station attendant for the next 9 years until his brother would eventually sell the company and put both of them into retirement. But retirement wouldn't last. In 1980, a year later, Ronald would go on to accept a job as a janitor at J.C. Penney, a title he would hold for the next 17 years until he retired for his second time. It was then that his life got quieter. He kept his relationships with the kids, he never upgraded his home, he never remarried, but he did buy his first and only car, a 2007 Toyota Yaris. But as time would have it, in 2014, still known for keeping his clothes together with safety pins, Ronald Read would die of natural causes. But that's when the world finally took notice of him. While Ronald Read lived quietly, what he left behind was anything but. When Ronald died, there was no headlines, there was no reporters, there was no family fighting over an estate, just a modest home, a used Toyota, and a man everyone thought had very little. But then the paperwork began. By law, Ronald's house would go through probate in the state of Vermont. But then something just didn't add up. Not at first, and not all at once, but line by line, account by account, stock by stock. What the state discovered wasn't debt. It wasn't hidden cash. It wasn't even a mistake. Ronald had accumulated millions, not by an inheritance, not from gambling, and not from a sudden windfall. Something far more uncomfortable: time. And by the time the full picture came into focus, Ronald Read, the janitor, the gas station attendant, the man known for holding his clothes together with safety pins, was worth over $8 million. Most of it just quietly wrapped up in blue chip stocks. Companies you recognize, companies you trust, companies that are talked about on finance shows every single day. The same companies the experts will tell you are too late to invest in and won't make you rich. Ronald owned them anyway, and he held them for decades. And that's what made people uncomfortable. If Ronald can do this, no status, no formal education, no privilege, then the question isn't about how much money he had. It's about why we thought he couldn't have it in the first place. When most people imagine the economy, it's something wild, unpredictable, dangerous, something to be feared, like a lion, something you have to fight, outthink, or tame. And Ronald didn't do any of that. Ronald stared the lion down, and instead of wrestling with it, he handed it a box of kitty litter. Not to control it, not to impress it, just to deal with the mess. Because let's face it, the markets are messy. They panic, they drop, they scare people into bad decisions. Ronald just made sure he wasn't standing in it, quietly avoiding the litter box. So what does this mean? What did Ronald do? Well, he didn't day trade, he didn't speculate, and he didn't chase the next big thing. What he did do was buy pieces of companies, large companies, established companies, companies you don't think about, but rely on every single day. Utilities, financial institutions, manufacturers. And when these companies paid out dividends, he didn't spend it, he reinvested it again and again and again, year after year, decade after decade. Ronald was never trying to time the market. He never panicked when the prices fell. But if the prices fell, he bought. And if the prices rose, he held. Just pure consistency. He lived below his means, not temporarily, but permanently. He avoided debt, he avoided lifestyle inflation, and he just let time do the work. While others were out there looking for shortcuts, Ronald committed to patience. While others were out there trying to beat the system, Ronald stayed in it. And that's what most people miss. What Ronald did wasn't flashy, and it definitely didn't look impressive. But over time, quiet decisions compound. So if Ronald Read had millions, what did he actually do with it? When Ronald died, most of his worth would go somewhere a bit unexpected. Not to luxury, not to status, but to community. Quiet institutions. Institutions that don't glorify their own accomplishments, they just help. There was no announcements, no press releases, no victory lap. Most people didn't even know that the donations existed until after Ronald passed, which is important because Ronald didn't use money to be seen. He didn't treat it like it was some scoreboard to life. He treated it as a tool in his way, a way that left things slightly better than he found them. There's a phrase people like to use, dying rich. It's presented to us like a victory, like a final score, like you've actually won. But when you take the time to actually sit with it, it's a bit strange. It doesn't tell us how you lived. It doesn't tell us who you helped. It doesn't even tell us who you were. Just what's left over. And in modern culture, money is often treated as the goal. More money, more growth, more accumulation. As if the whole point to life is to see who has the biggest pile when it's all said and done. But Ronald didn't live that way. He didn't let wealth determine his identity. He didn't use it to separate himself from others. And he certainly didn't let it change his view of the world. He lived simply. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. And that's what most people miss. Ronald didn't die rich because that was never the goal. The money was never the achievement. The restraint, the patience, the clarity was. And so, which one's the myth? Dying rich or living rich? Ronald Read didn't use money to escape the world. He didn't use it to obsess over what he owned. He used it to stay grounded. Ronald Read understood something that most of us never slow down long enough to notice. That accumulation without intention is just noise. Maybe the money was never the point. Maybe the point was always what we did with it.